All right, Rachel, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I am looking forward to our conversation. I always like to start with the quick spark notes on who you are and your background. Do you mind giving us the short version and a little bit about your school?
Yeah. So I began my career in public education in 2006, like many of my colleagues through Teach for America. I had the opportunity to start my career in charter schools at the Soulsville Charter School in Memphis, Tennessee. I worked there for 2 years, helped to found a KIPP school in Columbus, Ohio as a teacher. And then my personal life brought me here to New Mexico. It was a very weird world in 2009 in New Mexico public education. I was actually not able to find a role in a public school. And so I worked at a Catholic school for a
Oh, wow.
year, which really solidified my understanding that my heart and my mind is in public education and working with students that may not have other options for education. And then after that, I had the opportunity to work at a STEM-based charter school in a suburb of Albuquerque here. I had my own children during that time, and because of some special needs that my son has, I moved to the school district that we were living in to work. So we had matching schedules, which ultimately led me to working on a reservation in rural New Mexico. And from there, I did some teacher leader work with the state of New Mexico, and Hannah Scandera was in office here as the Secretary of Ed, where I got to meet probably 50 to 100 of the best educators in the state of New Mexico. And with that, opportunities opened for me to learn more about the charter landscape and what's going on in New Mexico. And I applied for the Building Excellent Schools, now BES, a fellowship for founding a charter school. And my feather in my hat regarding that is I went through the entire BES hiring process, which is typically months and months, in about 10 days. And that included the holiday of the 4th of July. I spent
Oh,
about
wow.
12 hours in Boston, yeah, interviewing with the illustrious Linda Brown. And just my life changed there. I was able to found Solare Collegiate. We opened in 2019. We are to date the highest scoring charter application in the New Mexico Public Education Commission's history. One of our values was making sure that if we're a brand new school, no excuses. We have to offer transportation. We have to offer food service, which I think is what makes us a little bit different than some charter schools here. And now we've just gone through our first renewal. We finished our 6th year of operation, and we will be expanding to offer elementary grades beginning next year. So we're a middle school program by design, and we are adding grades K1 and 2 for this new school year, and then we'll slow grow until we have a comprehensive K8 program.
Love it. Well, congrats to you on all the success, first off, and really cool to see your educational journey and where it's brought you. I think your school's at a really interesting point. Like a lot of time people we have on the show are at either end of the growth trajectory. Like we might have someone from a large scale network, and then we
Mm-hmm.
also might have someone who's maybe a year or two into founding a school and is kind of in the messy early stages. And so really excited to have you sharing your experiences 6 years in, fresh off a renewal, growing, probably so many different things we could explore together. But one of the things you and I were talking about offline was this idea of staffing models, building out teams to best support kind of the need at the organization. And I want to start by sort of previewing our topic today for listeners. Could you talk us through kind of what you're experimenting with right now at Solare and how that's manifested itself? And then we'll unpack, we'll unpack things further in the rest of the conversation.
Right. So I think we're doing some really exciting and innovative things. I think as far as teacher and staffing goes, I'm a big fan of taking a deficit and flipping it into an asset. And so in this case, I struggle with hiring. I struggle with identifying like strengths and opportunities for growth and what are just like plain out red flags with hiring. And so we historically have seen quite a bit of turnover. We also, if you're paying attention, opened up in that COVID year. And so our first couple foundational years, really rocky for so many reasons. In addition, you just teacher candidates and folks wanting to stay in the field during COVID. That definitely impacted, I think, our staffing. And so we really doubled down on our hiring process and made our hiring process more involved to try to ensure that we're getting the right fit people into Solare. Once we started getting the right fit people into place, I'm a teacher at heart. I went directly from classroom to head administrator of a school. So I don't have a lot of middleman experience. And in a lot of ways, I think that's kind of shaped who we've become because we've realized that mid-tier leadership, we're trying to make this decision. Like, is that serving us in the way that we need to, or can we reallocate some of our resources to having the people on the ground, our teachers, take on more impactful leadership work within our school community? And we have soft tested that with grade level leadership in our school, which has worked really well. And now we're expanding that to include attendance, our approach to discipline, which uses a restorative justice approach, and even some even the tinier things like management of token economy. We want to put more responsibility into teachers' hands and more dollars into their pocket.
Okay, so here's the idea. It's reallocating, like if I'm understanding you correctly, you're reallocating resources that could go to sort of maybe like director level administrative work that's kind of managing the organization.
Right.
You're trying to put that responsibility back in the hands of teachers, and also think about, okay, how, like, those dollars that get freed up, how could we use those differently? Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I love this idea because this is something that's actually pretty common in the private sector, right? Like companies do this all the time where they reach a certain size and they say, "Hey, we have too many mid-level managers. Like what are all the why are we allocating so much resource here? We should be really investing in our people who are doing the work." And I think it's really interesting applying that same framework to the education space. You mentioned a couple ways that you all have started testing this. Like I think you mentioned your attendance liaison. Could you talk to us, one, about like, how did you first decide, okay, this isn't just an idea, we're going to execute on this? Because presumably that meant firing people potentially,
Right.
or elimination of roles. How did you decide, okay, we're going to jump in on this? And then what did the conversations look like about how to use that freed up budget?
Right. So this came from a difficult hiring circumstance. We had a attendance liaison who just wasn't working out. It was a pretty frustrating process, I think, for all involved. As they were in their role, we started a call to action to our teachers to help us with attendance. And so what I noticed is when I started studying the data week over week, that the moves that were most impactful for our children in the circumstance of, say, like attendance or chronic absenteeism. If I did a call to action for my teachers and said, "Hey, I need you to help me. We have 13 kids on this chronic absentee at risk list. What can we do to get them off that list?" Giving them the resources, giving them the power in their hand is to build the rapport, build the relationships with kids and get them to school. We saw more movement in teacher action than we did in having a full-time position for a mid-level or mid-tier leadership position. So when our attendance liaison exited the role, we took that as an opportunity to really lean in and identify what is going wrong and what is going right with attendance and attendance improvements at our school in particular, as well as within the state, nationally, and everywhere else that's struggling with chronic absenteeism. And we just realized if we can have our teachers take on more of that responsibility, that's where we really see the change in the movement. We had, I think with our 8th grade team, we had 15 or 20 kids that were on a chronic absentee risk list. They were on track to miss more than 10% of the school year. Because we were kind of we were looking into the future, my grade level lead team, they were able to work with their co-teachers, they were able to work with students. And a lot of it was just like simple stuff like, "Hey, come to school. We miss you when you're not here." Like
We
like a
want you
teacher
to be in the seat. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. A teacher saying that is way more impactful than that random lady who sits in the front office.
Yeah,
and I think like
totally.
it all goes back to like relationships. And then when you start thinking about dollars, that's a $65,000 starting position for an attendance liaison. If you think about so $65,000 plus about 30% if we think about benefits and everything else that goes into hiring an individual. All of a sudden, I have this pool of resources that I can reallocate to my teachers, who then now feel more empowered. They're leading, they're owning more of the leadership within our school without having to leave the classroom, and we can compensate them more appropriately. So they're walking away with making true, real impact, and then there's true, real impact that's happening for them as well.
So what does that look like practically? Like that, let's just use round numbers, that 100K all in with benefits and everything else, that 100K, that role doesn't get backfilled. That's a substantial amount of money. How do you all practically think about allocating that? If I'm a teacher and I'm getting tapped to take on more responsibilities, is this like a bonus based on performance? Is it a stipend because I'm taking on these additional responsibilities? Maybe unpack some of the in the weeds things for people who are listening and say, "Oh, this is an interesting idea. How could I maybe replicate that?"
Yeah. So we were, in some ways, we were kind of at an advantage because we've had for a number, I think 3 years now, 4 years now, we've had grade level leadership. So that's something that we've invested some work in. We have one grade level lead teacher per grade level. They get additional compensation and then they take on additional responsibilities. So we did have a practice with this. And when we had this attendance liaison that didn't work out, I turned to my admin team and I said, the teachers, and I named this particular teacher, Mr. So and so, he was the one that really made impact in this last
Yeah.
2 months of school in changing attendance. Like, why we should be compensating them. And so we then decided just like dive in super deep and say, like, okay, cool. Like, what else is not working in our school? Having a dean of students as being one single human, particularly in the post-COVID landscape where we're dealing with kids that are coming to us, not just with whatever baggage they may have coming from home, but like the baggage of being educated in a COVID generation.
Right.
The one person, it's a tough job. My former dean, who's now my principal, she's the smartest, the toughest, the most resilient person that I know. And after 3 years in the role, she's like, I got to tap out. I think this is too much. And we realized that the burden of responsibility that comes with some of these roles, it can be really taxing for one individual. We had the opportunity to visit Racheal College Prep out in the Bronx, out east, and they use a team approach for their restorative justice team. And so very similar, stealing some of the ideas from great schools that let people opt into leadership. Of course, we want to encourage folks that we know will have great strengths there, but like really give our teachers the time to say, hey, I want to be a part of this team. I want to be a leader, but I want to still be in the classroom. When I'm crunching numbers, because we got rid of 2 mid-level admin positions, the school is actually coming out into an advantage even with all these different stipend roles that we have for our teachers. So it gives us teacher leadership opportunity. It gives us opportunity to get more dollars in teachers' pockets. And then it also leaves us with a pool of funds that can help to support any of the endeavors that our teachers are trying to do at various grade levels. So it also is not a one size fits all. It gives our teachers a little bit more autonomy, but with a strong structure of support from the leadership team.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like there's just a lot of flexibility in what you guys can do. And the idea of tapping more people to take on leadership roles also promotes a culture of like personal development and leadership development. You're probably building a pipeline of people who are realizing, hey, like this is something I'm really interested in and passionate about. I'm guessing, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing this has sparked all sorts of other interesting conversations and ideas amongst you and your leadership team about maybe just like challenging fundamental ideas of let's go back to first principles and sort of redesign this. You mentioned the attendance liaison and the dean of students. Are there other roles you're also sort of starting to think about, or maybe other areas where you're asking teachers to take on a little bit more of the collective responsibility?
At this point, we're focused on 4 areas. So we're maintaining our grade level leadership, which in a lot of ways is like an operational leadership position, maybe like a step under like what you would expect an assistant principal to do to some capacity. Then we have, so that's going to continue to be a role. We have our restorative justice team, where our goal is that we have one team member from each grade level, plus additional if there is interest, helping with dealing with scholar behaviors, restorative justice practices, resetting kids, getting them back in the classroom. Our priority is also keeping kids in the classroom spaces. Then we have the attendance, which we talked about a bit. And then like a really nice, and this is like kind of a real baby leadership position, but management of our token economy. We have a point system for good behavior, not so good behavior, and then kids can cash in those points for various items in what we call our Bobcat store. And so having a grade level manager of that, I think really will help us to have our ear to the ground and what kids want, what kind of fun little tokens that do they appreciate, as well as like more direct management, because as opposed to having 15 kids come up to me and say, Miss Sewards, when am I going to get my new t-shirt from the Bobcat store? I have no idea. I don't touch that. But now that they know that they have a direct line to the person who manages it, I think like that's also going to help us to give better customer service, if you will, to our scholars.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so one of the things that I feel like is a through line here is you've really been intentional about your grade levels being teams. Like each grade level has a lead. There's sort of an intentional focus on the team dynamic here. Talk to me a little bit about personalities and teams. Like you mentioned hiring being a challenge. I think anyone listening to this can resonate there. Very few people feel like they're good at hiring. Tell me about how you think about team formation and sort of the team dynamic leading to success across the organization.
Yeah, thanks. So are pretty maniacal about from our inception. We want teachers to teach a single grade level. We want them to be able to deeply focus on the prep for whatever grade level they're teaching or whatever content area they're teaching. And so that in and of itself helps to like create the shell of intimate grade level teams. And what we've seen year over year is like when you get the coalescing of the right group of people on the right team, there's so much power in what a group of teachers can do. And so we saw that with in various years with our fifth grade teams, our eighth grade teams. We've had really, really, really strong grade level leadership and then really strong personal and professional bonds that were built amongst people on the grade level teams. And so our goal is to replicate that by giving our grade level teams a bit more autonomy in how they lead their teams, giving more people opportunities for leadership. And then in the hiring process, in the placement process, then looking at teacher personalities and trying to group people based on personalities that we think are going to be more similar and work well together. Our hope is that we'll see that it won't just be a one-off of one grade level team, like having a really deep, strong culture with the adults. We're hoping to replicate that across all of our grades. And it's great for kids when they see their teachers that genuinely love to work together and care about one another and have each other's backs, whether it be like, I have to go drop off medicine for my kid, I'll be right back, can you cover my class? Those sort of things, to also just having really high standards for our scholars and saying like, we love you and it's important that you're here. So I'm less confident in our personality pairings. I'm really excited to see how like this works out so what we talked about previously. But I think this could potentially just be like a big game changer for us, and even just how we consider staffing. I think less so in charter schools, but more so in like high turnover environments where you're just plugging holes in and you're saying, oh, this person has a science license, let's put them here. But then you discover that Mr. Science Guy has nothing in common with his colleagues, and we ask our teams to work together so closely as a grade level. We have to do our part too in like putting the right people on the right teams together.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, which is most hiring, especially in education, just tends to be reactive because the need is so high, right? Like you lose a teacher mid-year, it's devastating. You've got to fill that gap really fast. And sometimes you don't have the space to take a step back and say, what might the impact of putting this person on this team be? How are you all practically thinking about the hiring process? Tell us maybe a little bit more about your hiring process to help you identify. Like what jumps to mind for me is how are Racheal and her team thinking about like identifying this person might be a good fit here? Are you making the hiring process longer and more built out? Like tell us a little bit about some of those things that have allowed you to think about team formation.
Right. I think I shared this with you. I'm not great at hiring. And so the first and foremost is I worked very closely with my my leadership coach in wanting to bulk up interviewing and hiring practices. And so we launched a different hiring protocol than what we've done previously. And then secondarily, like my admin team, my two principals, my director of special education, we've worked in shoulder to shoulder in hiring practices over the course of the school year. And so we're really intentional. There's good accountability partners. We have one position open for special ed for next year, and my heart and soul just wants to like hire the first pulse I find to finish hiring and be able to get on with my life. But I thankfully have colleagues who remind me we don't want to do that. We know we all want to do that. We all want to hurry up and get hiring over with, but we still have to take our time and follow our process. And so our process, We've always done a model lesson, which I think is pretty standard for charter schools. Have the candidate come in, have the candidate then do a model lesson. But what we previously had been really just hands off with that. That's not in alignment to who we are when you come and work in our school environment. And so we had to make it really feel more like what it feels like to work at Solare Collegiate. And so we went from a quick 30-minute interview that was typically online, and then an on-site model lesson plus a panel interview, to keeping that initial interview. And then we've added pre-coaching and post-coaching meetings that the participant will participate in, or the interviewee will participate in prior and after teaching their lesson. We also have our deans of curriculum doing live coaching with the candidate in the moment, even during the model lesson.
Oh, interesting.
And the post meeting is like we're really seeing how people would respond to feedback and
Right.
how they think on their feet in a coaching meeting. And so that's been a game changer because we've had folks walk out of an interview and say, I don't think this is the place for me. And for us,
Mm.
like that feels like a win, right? Like I'm
Totally.
very
Yeah.
passionate about identify the right fit school. If we're not it, let's figure it out early and find the right fit school for you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like in addition to the feedback portion, because I think that's a great example of something practical like others could implement in their interview process. What were some of the, like, compared to the previous process, what were some of the other things that you feel like really changed? Did you have additional stakeholders weigh in on the process? Or, were there other things where you're like, man, our hiring process just looks very different as you all
Mhm.
prioritized shifting that?
Yeah, yes, I think we felt so when we started the school, I felt like this sense of true gratitude to anybody who would interview with me. And I
Mm,
think like that's a lot of times when you're in new school, it can feel like that. And
yeah.
then I think in some ways, I didn't ever get out of that mindset until recently when I realized, no, like we have some really great things going for us. Like this is a good place to work, and so we need to be more selective. And I think like our interview energy has to match like the perception that I now have of us as a school, which is that this is a great place to work and it's our job to find those right people so we can invest and keep them here long term.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so let's talk about some learnings for other leaders as you've been on this journey 6 years now, organizations growing. What would you say, like, as you reflect, maybe especially on the last, call it 18 to 24 months, where you've been experimenting with some of this, getting rid of some of those administrative roles, giving more responsibility to teachers? What are some of the key learnings or maybe unexpected challenges that you met that you could share for others who might be just considering some of these things or wanting to embark on a journey to sort of reimagine, their staffing responsibilities?
Yeah, yeah. I think the first and foremost, and I remember uh, Scott Heineman, who's the executive director of Excellent Schools New Mexico, which has provided startup support and our expansion support for us. He told me when I was interviewing for the BES fellowship, he said 300. That is your sweet spot. You have to have enrollment of 300 or more if you're really going to be able to do things. And he is so correct because the freedom that you start to get as an administrator once you have 300 or more students, yes, you may lose some of the small school feel, but the flexibility that you have within managing a budget and managing a
Mhm.
staff and creating staffing structures, the doors open up prolifically once you have, at least here in New Mexico, when you have over 300 students. And so like for my here in New Mexico, and I don't know if this is similar across the country, but we tend to lean in on a lot of like very small niche charter schools, which are really, really cool. Like we have so many outdoor charter schools, but when you're a head administrator that has to teach for 3 hours a day, like that's also like limiting like what our capacity and what
Mhm.
we can do. So I think like any advice that I could give for leaders is get that 300 as truly that sweet spot.
Got it. So get to a certain level of scale that allows you to start to
Yep.
experiment with some of these things. I know you've talked about a ton of the positives around empowering your teachers. This has allowed you to pay people more. That's always
Yeah.
a hot topic. Is there anything you would have done differently, or maybe as you're thinking about the current trajectory you're on, where you're really building out these grade level teams, any learnings from yourself and the rest of the leadership team where you're like, if I could go back, I might emphasize this a little bit more than we did at the beginning, or here's something that we're trying to focus on now that we didn't spend enough time on early on?
I wish for this hiring cycle, I just wish we would have started earlier. Like, I think that's always the wish.
Yeah.
Because we were not only replacing any people that were vacating roles, but we were hiring for an entire new school. We didn't start till end of January, and that was a huge mistake on our part, hence why we're still hiring for one more position. But I think previously, the biggest learning I had is be confident in the school that you've created. Like I think that for me, it was like, who's going to want to come and work at a brand new charter school? This feels
Yeah.
risky. Like I don't know. Like I'm going to be begging people to come in the door. But like if you have the vision and you have like that strong mission, just like be confident in that. And I don't know how you do that because like for me, I think like the confidence is a time thing and like saying like, okay, we're going to stick around for a while. Like I think we can start like tooting our own horn a little bit, but just really knowing who you are as a school and what your identity is and finding those people that fit that. Because I think in some ways it's founding year is easy for hiring because you have the weirdos like myself that are really excited about founding something and starting a school. Like there's a sexiness to founding a school. Like when
Yep.
it's 100 degrees in the first week of July and you're labeling books for the classroom libraries. Like some people really dig that. And then it's like this middle part where I was trying to figure out like, am I confident in who we are as an organization? And then like, so that was the tough part and like pushing myself through that more and better. I don't know if I'm even answering your question on this, but like that's kind of my experience about that is that the hiring the last 2 to 3 years was more difficult than the hiring in first year. And this year I feel so much more confident because number one, it's a team of us working together on it. We have such a strong, what we feel is a strong interview process. And now it's just like the wait and see. How do we feel about folks as they sit in their seats? I will tell you, I have brand new teachers that are excited to sign up for some of those leadership opportunities, those stipend opportunities. We're even opening up to new talent that hasn't been at Solare previously. And to me, that's really encouraging. Just thinking about folks who are either entering a new field or entering a new school. They want to do the basics of the role and additional.
Yeah,
That's really
and
exciting
more.
to me.
Yeah, totally. Definitely. I mean, I would imagine encouraging for you and the rest of the leadership team. You've mentioned throughout the conversation, there have been a couple organizations, individuals who've been particularly influential to yourself on this journey. Any other notable resources or organizations or books, things that you've found particularly beneficial as you all have continued to focus on organizational, culture, I guess would be the right word. Anything else that we can point listeners to in the show notes?
Yeah. So I'll start off with I am incredibly thankful for the Solare Collegiate Governing Board, who has given me opportunity and flexibility to work on these alternative staffing structures and stipend. They're very generous with the management of budget and allowing me to do some of those things. But that's just a shameless plug for our board. And we're always looking for new board members if anyone's interested. But I think also a lot of this spurred from some work that Brent Madden from Arizona State University, he's doing on being more innovative with staffing patterns. He's working, I think, cross country, like in Michigan, here in New Mexico, working with larger school districts. And essentially, like, their big idea is if you have somebody who's amazing at teaching reading, but not so great at teaching math, and like this is the thinking of like elementary structuring, traditional structuring, have the really amazing reading teacher teach reading to as many kids as humanly possible.
Right.
And don't worry about having them do math. Like we don't have to live in these structures of how we staff. To some degree, we do have licensure requirements, etc. But like we don't have to, like your average elementary school teacher does not have to teach all 4 subjects plus SEL. You could have somebody who is an amazing science instructor, but is garbage with dealing with parents. Like, why don't we like just get rid of the parent communication part and like have them then work on the things that they're really good at, enjoy, and make significant impact. Meanwhile, the teacher down the hall who's on the same grade level team can then be like the voice for parent communication because that's a talent that they have, it's a passion that they have. And so I was able to do some professional learning that Brent was presenting, and the plan that I just went over with you, that was inspired by the work that he's doing. It's different, like for me like very similar work. Like we don't have to do teaching structures the same way that we've been doing it for the last 120 years. Like there's no reason for us to stick to that if it's not serving kids well. And here in New Mexico, we're first in the country. We know that the current strategies are not landing in the way that we need them to, and so we have to try something different.
Love it. Awesome. Well, that's probably a perfect place for us to wrap. Racheal, thank you so much for sharing your experience. Tons of interesting takeaways, hopefully inspiring to someone else who's rethinking their staffing structures. And if people want to learn more about Solare or connect with you, where should we send them? Should we send them to your website or LinkedIn, or where should we send folks?
Yeah, either way, I'm a big advocate for we don't silo information. If there's something that we're doing that works and others want to like learn from it, steal it, whatever, open door, come visit. I'm on LinkedIn. And then on our website as well, there's email addresses that you want to reach out to. It's www.solarecollegiate.org.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll link to that in the show notes. Racheal, thanks again for coming on. This was great.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Charter School Insider. This show is brought to you by BuyQ, the group purchasing organization specifically for charter schools. Want to learn how to maximize your school's purchasing power? Join together with thousands of other charter schools by visiting buyq.org/sign-up. BuyQ's purchasing program is free and has no obligations or commitments required. If you enjoyed today's episode, do us a favor and subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. If you have a question or feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at podcast@buyq.org. Thanks, and we hope you'll tune in for the next one.